Part 4, I think. What if these so called experts were taught for generations a falsehood and they believed what they were telling people is true, and their generational schooling makes them confirm their bias? You've raised a profoundly important and challenging point about the nature of knowledge, belief, and the potential for collective delusion, even within seemingly rational or empirical frameworks. This scenario describes a phenomenon that can affect any system of thought, not just traditional religions. Here's a breakdown of why this is a critical consideration. The problem with inherited falsehoods and confirmation bias. Generational teaching of falsehoods, echo chambers, and silos. When a particular worldview, regardless of its content, religious, scientific, philosophical, political, economic, becomes dominant within a group or institution, it can create an intellectual echo chamber. New generations are trained within this framework, often without exposure to genuinely alternative perspectives or the historical context of how those ideas came to be. Curriculum and pedagogy. Educational systems, from religious seminaries to scientific universities to corporate training programs, are designed to transmit established knowledge. If that established knowledge contains unexamined assumptions or outright falsehoods, these are passed down. Truth by repetition. The mere act of being taught something repeatedly by respected figures and seeing it reinforced by peers and institutions can make it feel self-evidently true, regardless of its actual veracity. Confirmation bias in experts. Human nature. Experts, despite their training and intellect, are still human. Confirmation bias is a fundamental cognitive bias where individuals tend to seek, interpret, and remember information in a way that confirms their pre existing beliefs or hypotheses. Paradigm protection. In scientific fields, this can manifest as a resistance to challenging established paradigms, the dominant theoretical framework. Scientists within a paradigm are incentivized to work within it, and new evidence that strongly contradicts it can be met with skepticism, dismissal, or attempts to reinterpret it to fit the existing model. Career and reputation. For experts, their careers, reputations, and funding often depend on working within the accepted framework. Actively challenging the foundational tenets can be professionally risky. Selective interpretation. Even when presented with contradictory evidence, confirmation bias can lead experts to interpret that evidence in a way that minimizes its challenge to their existing beliefs, or to dismiss it as flawed methodology. The illusion of objectivity. The danger is that if this generational teaching and confirmation bias are strong enough, the experts genuinely believe they are teaching the truth, operating objectively, and engaging in rigorous inquiry. They may not be consciously deceiving anyone, they themselves are products of the very system they perpetuate. This creates a powerful and often impenetrable barrier to questioning. Does any of this sound familiar to people over these like 4 videos I've done? How do you challenge a truth that is reinforced by every authority figure, every textbook, and every prevailing cultural message? And then it goes into examples, historical and contemporary. Scientific history, science, despite its self-correcting mechanisms, which it doesn't really have because it's just said about confirmation bias and interpreting data to fit that bias. There's many examples of long-held truths that were eventually overturned. Yeah, to fit the nihilistic, consumerist, materialist narratives. Yeah. Geocentric model for over 1,500 years, expert consensus supported by observation and revered authorities like Aristotle and Ptolemy was that the Earth was the centre of the universe. This was eventually overturned by Copernicus, Galileo, and Kepler, who faced significant resistance. Yeah, because what if they wasn't true? What if it is geocentric? What if they weren't true? That's why it was resisted. It might not even be either of them things. It might not be heliocentric or geocentric. It might be something completely different. Then it goes into phlogiston theory, saying that it's proven false by Lavoisier. I've heard Peter and Pete talk about stuff like that, saying that it wasn't. Always like you need to go and watch their videos. Luminescence ether. It says that Albert Einstein overturned it with theory of relativity because of the Michelson-Morley experiment couldn't detect the movement of the Earth in the ether, so they got rid of the ether and says here's relativity. Medical dogmas, centuries like bloodletting and stuff like that. But have they not brought that back though with leeches and that on people that have got maggots on wounds and stuff to eat all the dead skin and stuff like that and the dead flesh? Secular worldviews, communism, Marxism in states built on communist ideology. It goes into like politics. I'm not going to go through all that. Economic models, American dream, or other cultural narratives. We know all about all that. Challenge of breaking free. This scenario highlights the profound difficulty of critical thinking and independent verification. It requires skepticism of authority, a willingness to question even the most respected sources, openness to dissenting views, actively seeking out perspectives that challenge the consensus, intellectual humility, acknowledging that even deeply held beliefs might be wrong, empirical verification, where possible, seeking out and evaluating the raw data or evidence rather than simply accepting conclusions. In essence, if the experts in a secular worldview are operating under generational biases and falsehoods that they themselves genuinely believe, then the psychological and sociological dynamics become eerily similar to that of a dogmatic religious system. The shared belief, the trust in authority, the reluctance to question, and the potential for a false consensus are common to both. This is why vigilance and critical inquiry are essential for any worldview, whether it claims to be based on faith or reason. I'm going to go into the next part. I think it's part 5. Alright, thanks for listening to this one.